At exactly 8 o'clock in the morning, billions of people around the world wake up expecting nothing unusual. Alarm clocks ring, traffic begins moving through crowded streets, children get ready for school, and millions of ordinary mornings begin just as they always have. Skyman wakes up, sits on the edge of his bed, and opens his eyes, but something feels wrong. He can hear the traffic outside. He can hear birds in the distance and the quiet sounds of people moving through their homes. Yet when he looks around his room, he sees absolutely nothing. At first, he assumes he's still half asleep. He blinks several times, rubs his eyes, and waves his hand directly in front of his face. Nothing changes. He reaches for the wall and slowly stands up, trying to understand what is happening. Then, within seconds, the same realization begins spreading across the world. Drivers suddenly cannot see the road in front of them. Doctors cannot see their patients. Pilots cannot see their runways. Parents reach desperately for their children, while millions of strangers stand frozen in streets they know by heart. And the terrifying part is that nobody knows why. The sun is still shining. The world is still there. Nothing has disappeared. Humanity simply cannot see it anymore. And somehow everyone will remain blind for exactly 24 hours. The first few minutes are confusing, but the consequences begin almost immediately. In cities around the world, roads that were full of movement suddenly become scenes of complete uncertainty. Drivers slow down because they can no longer see traffic lights, pedestrians, or the cars around them. Some vehicles stop in the middle of intersections, while others collide simply because nobody knows what is in front of them. On highways, the situation becomes even more dangerous, as thousands of people try to navigate roads they can no longer see. Airports face an even greater problem. Pilots can still hear instructions from control towers, but they cannot see the runway, the instruments clearly, or the aircraft around them. Trains are forced to slow down or stop. Ships begin drifting without reliable visual navigation. And public transportation systems that depend on signs, screens, and maps become almost impossible to use. Meanwhile, hospitals are overwhelmed by people who need help navigating rooms, finding medication, or reaching emergency departments. But the strangest part is that the world itself hasn't become darker. The sunlight is still there. The buildings are still standing. The roads are still visible to anyone who could see them. Humanity has simply lost its most important connection to the physical world. And within minutes, one thing becomes painfully clear. Modern civilization was never designed for a world where nobody can see. As the first hour passes, the confusion slowly turns into something much more serious. People begin realizing that the biggest danger isn't simply not being able to see, it's that almost everything modern society depends on suddenly becomes difficult or impossible. Supermarkets become chaotic because customers cannot read labels, find products, or even move safely through crowded aisles. ATMs, payment terminals, navigation systems, digital displays, and written instructions become almost useless when nobody can see them. In hospitals, doctors and nurses are forced to rely almost entirely on touch, sound, and memory while trying to care for patients they can no longer visually examine. At home, parents hold on to their children and refuse to let them move too far away, while strangers begin forming small groups simply because being alone in complete darkness feels too dangerous. Even simple tasks that humans normally perform without thinking, crossing a street, climbing stairs, pouring a glass of water, unlocking a door, suddenly require concentration and trust. And then another problem begins to appear. Emergency services are receiving calls from millions of frightened people, but police officers, firefighters, paramedics, and rescue workers are facing the exact same blindness as everyone else. The systems designed to protect civilization are still operating, but the people running them can no longer see what is happening around them. For the first time in modern history, humanity isn't fighting an enemy, a disease, or a natural disaster. It's fighting the simple fact that nobody can see. But as the hours continue, something unexpected begins to happen. Humanity slowly starts adapting to the darkness. People stop trying to move normally and begin using their other senses in ways they never had to before. Voices become guides, walls become roads, footsteps become signals. Families stay together, strangers begin helping strangers, and people create simple systems to move through buildings and streets by holding onto ropes, following sounds, and counting their steps. In some cities, people start leaving doors open so others can find their way into safe places, while volunteers guide people through crowded streets by calling out directions. Technology also begins to change its role. Phones can still speak messages aloud, recognize voices, give directions, and connect people who are lost. But suddenly, the visual world that technology was designed around becomes almost meaningless. For the first time, people begin experiencing their surroundings through sound, touch, memory, and trust instead of sight. And slowly, something remarkable happens. The world becomes quieter, but people become more connected. A stranger guiding someone across a dangerous road matters more than 1,000 signs. A familiar voice becomes more valuable than a map. And while civilization is still struggling to function, humanity begins discovering that it can survive without seeing far better than anyone expected. But there is still one question nobody can answer. Asterisk, what happens when the 24 hours are finally over? As the 24th hour approaches, the entire world falls into a strange silence. People who spent the day learning how to navigate without sight begin gathering around the places where they feel safest, waiting for the moment everyone has been counting down to. Some are terrified that their vision might never return. Others have already adapted so much that they are no longer sure what the first thing they want to see will be. Then, at exactly the 24-hour mark, something changes. One person suddenly sees light. Another sees the outline of a wall. Someone else sees the face of a loved one for the first time in an entire day. Within seconds, vision begins returning across the planet, and the world that had been completely inaccessible suddenly comes rushing back. People look at their homes, their streets, their phones, and most importantly, at each other. But after spending an entire day without sight, many realize something they never expected. They had spent years surrounded by things they rarely noticed. The face of a parent, the color of the sky, the expression of a friend, the simple movement of another human being walking past them. For 24 hours, humanity had lost the ability to see, and in those 24 hours, millions of people discovered how much they had been looking at without truly noticing. But there is one final question left behind after everything returns to normal. If you knew you would lose your sight tomorrow, what would you choose to look at today?